In this video, we're going to look at applying the distributive property in algebra. So there's two types of problems, like we saw at the end of the last video, where we're going to use the distributive property in algebra. And this is a skill you're going to use somewhat frequently. So let's look at the first problem. We have x times, in parentheses, 3 plus 4. So the product of x and the sum of 3 and 4. So in column A, it asks us to perform the parentheses first, and we can do that since both 3 and 4 are numbers. So now we have x times 7. Okay, now that looks really weird. Okay, so we can take the 7 out of the parentheses. They're next to each other, so that's implied multiplication, and we would rewrite this as 7x. Now let's rewrite this using the distributive property. So I'm going to write the original up here. Okay. And one way you can think of this is you're distributing or multiplying the x both by the 3 and the 4, okay? And you're going to have the sum in the middle. So we have x times 3. The operation in the middle is addition, plus x times 4. And again, we would write this as 3x plus 4x. Okay. So we just performed this multiplication in two different ways. The first way, we did the addition first, then we wrote the multiplication. The second way, we rewrote it using the distributive property. And in the last column, it states, write an equation stating that expression in column A equals expression in column B. So basically, 7x equals 3x plus 4x. Okay? And this is the main result we really want. When we're using the distributive property in algebra, we're going to be given things like 3x plus 4x, and to find the result and to simplify it, to perform this addition, we'll add the coefficients 3 plus 4 to get 7. Let's look at the next one. Parentheses first, 7 minus 5 is 2. So we have x times 2, which we'd write as 2x. Now let's set up the distributive property. So this one has subtraction, but it's really not very different. We're going to distribute the x to the 7 and the 5, and we're going to keep the subtraction in the middle. So this is x times 7 minus x times 5. And again, we'd write this as 7x minus 5x. Now we'll write an equation equating these two columns, and we have 2x equals 7x minus 5x. Okay. So notice if we have this subtraction problem, we need to perform 7 minus 5 to get 2, and our result of 7x minus 5x is 2x. Now let's look at this last one. It's going to have a negative number. So we have x, and 2 minus 8 is negative 6. Okay, now notice this is in parentheses. These are being multiplied. So we would rewrite this as negative 6x. Now let's use the distributive property. We have x, parentheses 2 minus 8. I'm going to distribute the x to the 2 and the 8. And we have x times 2 minus x times 8, or 2x minus 8x. Okay. So this means in the last column, negative 6x equals 2x minus 8x. So again, when we want to find 2x minus 8x, we'd find 2 minus 8 is negative 6, and multiply it by x, like we did here. Let's look at the next type. So in these three problems, notice the x is within the parentheses, not on the outside. So we're going to use the distributive property here really for a different reason. Our goal is going to be to multiply 2 times the sum of x plus 3. Okay? In this case, we cannot add x and 3 because we don't know what x is. So instead, we're going to rewrite it using the distributive property. Okay, I'm going to draw the arrows here. So I have 2 times x plus 2 times 3. Here we're asked to simplify the result, so I'll write that as 2x plus 6. And here we're going to write an equation stating that column A is equal to column B. So this is column A. So 2 times x plus 3 is equivalent to 2x plus 6. Let's look at the next one. Now notice we're multiplying by a negative here, so I'm going to put the negative in parentheses. So we have negative 3 times 4 minus negative 3 times x. Okay. So you'll need to be a little bit careful when you're multiplying by a negative. Okay. Notice that each of these are negative 3's. We have a subtraction symbol. Okay, we can rewrite this as addition later when we're subtracting a negative. It becomes adding a positive, but be sure you don't leave out one of these negative signs as a result of just too many negative signs being there. So now negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Okay. And let's do this in 2 steps. So I'm going to keep the subtraction. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. I'm going to put the negative in parentheses. And when we subtract a negative, it's the same as adding a positive. So this is negative 12 plus 3x. So this is the simplest form. So now let's write our equation. We have negative 3 times 4 minus x is equal or equivalent to negative 12 plus 3x. Okay, and just to start you looking at patterns, notice when the outside number is negative, okay, the 4 was positive, we multiplied it by a negative, and now we have negative 12. Okay, and then we had a negative and subtraction turned into a positive. Okay. And looking at the last one, you could think of this as the opposite of the difference of x minus 5. Okay. Or another way you may want to think of this is negative 1 times x minus 5. Okay. So now let's multiply each of these terms by negative 1. So we have negative 1 times x minus negative 1 times 5. So now we're going to simplify our results. Well, negative 1 times x, we write that as just negative x. And we'll do this in 2 steps again. So minus negative 5. Okay. But if we subtract a negative, that's the same as adding a positive. So this is negative x plus 5. So now looking at writing an equation showing our expressions are equal, the opposite of x minus 5 equals negative x plus 5. Okay. This is something you'll be doing a lot, okay? And a lot of times you'll need to subtract something, and we'll think of this as a subtraction sign, and there'll be some expression in front of it. So it's nice to notice the pattern. Since you're multiplying by 1, notice we still have an x and a 5 in here, but what ended up changing? Well, this x was a positive x in the parentheses, and it's a negative x outside the parentheses. And we had subtracting 5 in the parentheses, and we have adding 5 outside the parentheses. So make sure you do these a few times before you use shortcuts like that, but when you start to look at the patterns, you can find quicker ways to do these.